Hello, my name is Robbie Ward. I'm an investigative reporter in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm here with other journalists and open government advocates on behalf of the Society of Professional Journalists to discuss freedom of information issues on Sunshine Week. And so joining us now, we have a number of people in no particular order, but we have Jennifer, is it Karchmer in France?
Jennifer Karchmer in Montpellier, France.
Okay. We also have Joey Senat. He's at Oklahoma State University. He's a media law researcher and associate professor of journalism. It's good to have you, Joey. And we also have Kathryn Foxhall. She's a veteran reporter in Washington, D.C. She has a lot of experience covering the federal government and everything that entails. And so today, this really it involves public records and freedom of information issues. And this is just such a broad topic. And briefly, all of us have our interest in it, and you know, there are people out there, journalists who have just a varied background of experience with public records, everything from never having filed a Freedom of Information Act request before to those that are pro. I'm curious, for any of y'all out there, what right now are you finding are some of the biggest challenges for reporters related to access to public records?
Well, I can talk about what's going on in Oklahoma, though. Excuse me, my voice is just about to come back, but not quite. You know, problems that I see here that I see in other states is the tendency toward delaying, which is, you know, access delayed is access denied, and they have, for example, in our governor's office, we have her legal counsel used to be in the federal government and deal with FOIA requests, and to him, 18 months is a good time. That's perfectly acceptable for response time, but it doesn't work really well at state and local level, and that's the approach our governor's office has taken since she's been in office, now in her second term. In fact, there were stories recently where our governor's office did not release records for 11 months, and now during Sunshine Week she's releasing them, so we think she's confused about what Sunshine Week means. It's not the week you release records. So.
In Oklahoma, what is the state law in terms of time that public bodies have to produce the public records?
We are one of the states that does not have a specific time. It says prompt and reasonable access, with which our AG is defined as only the time to locate and compile the record. And we had a discussion. Our Sunshine Week conference was Saturday, and we had people from around the country. And Ryan McNeil, one of my former students, has been in states with a limit and states without. And like in Texas, when he was down there, if there's 30 days, they'll take 30 days, or if there's 10 days, they'll take 10 days. There's pros and cons on both sides.
Right, I think that's very interesting, and it also points out how, from state to state, the laws related to access to public records is just across the board. In Mississippi, where I have most of my experience with public records requests, you know, there's less than 3 weeks, if I recall. The law is 14 business days, or roughly around there. And if they don't respond to your request within 7 business days, then they're required to provide the information within 7 business days.
So if you were requesting a police report that you should normally be able, in a lot of states, just walk up and see a copy, then they wait 7 days to respond to your request for that?
they could wait 7 days, but they would have to produce a response on the 7th day, or they would have to, or they would be in violation of the law. And so I guess for people out there who are still really new to filing public records requests, if you file a public records request to a local government or a state government, certainly the first thing you'd like to do is look up the law for your particular state to see what the law states, to make sure that you understand the law, so a public official doesn't try to mislead you, or so you don't try to have them enforce something in a law that doesn't exist. And
yeah, the presumption should always be, I think Pennsylvania was the last state to have it the opposite way, and it changed several years ago, but the presumption should be that the record's open, and unless it's been specifically exempted by usually a state statute, usually by the legislature. So people will ask me all the time, you know, am I entitled to the record? Well, I don't know. We've got thousands of exemptions now in our state law. So the person who's saying no, the government official, has the burden of knowing the exemption. And the other piece of advice I give is check the exemption, because I've had plenty of government attorneys, either through incompetency or willful incompetency, are flat out lying, cite exemptions that don't apply in any way.
Right. And I think that just really underscores the importance of reading the law, having familiarity with the law, knowing the narrow exemptions that exist within the law, so that they can't try to pull a fast one on you. And you always ask them to cite the specific exemption that they want to use to justify denial of a request, so that you'll have it in writing, and also to show them that you're serious about acquiring the public records. What about you, Kathryn? What has been your experience through the years in terms of acquiring public records on the federal level?
It's been varied. It's hasn't been a major avenue through which I do reporting, but when I have done it, sometimes I have gotten things fairly promptly. Gotten a lot of stuff that you know, I had asked for a lot of stuff, and I got a lot of stuff. But you know, right now, I have a Freedom of Information request that goes back to a year, and I've heard nothing.
I think on the federal level, that's relatively common. I'm still never received a mugshot of someone who served time in a federal prison that I requested. I know it's been close to 2 years ago now. But
I'm hearing that a great deal. I was at a meeting at the museum about freedom of information on Friday. They always do theirs the day before Sunshine Week, and this was the theme throughout, that the delays are just inordinate.
And along with knowing the actual public records law for a particular state, and it's also extremely helpful, I have found, to look at the retention schedules for a particular state, or the state that you request the information. Because what the retention schedules do is they list categories that every particular government body, from the local government to the county government to the state government, it lists every single public record that they're required to archive and maintain, and it also shows the length of time that public bodies must maintain those records. And I always look at those a menu of public records that governments are required to have. And when I'm looking at records I would like, I often request information directly from retention schedules, since they must maintain and archive those records by law. And I'm curious, Jennifer, with your location being in France, do you work much with public records laws in France, or do you strictly focus on the United States?
Yeah, good question. The reason I'm currently in France is that I'm studying French, the language, so I'm not necessarily working as a journalist yet. It's mainly due to the fact that my French skills are not fluent enough. But I will add that I did a research project in Iceland in 2012 where I met with and researched media workers, journalists in both print and broadcast, and started to get informed about their freedom of information, access to information, and freedom of the press. And the reason I did that was because I'm also a correspondent with Reporters Without Borders, and Iceland, interestingly, has been ranked at, I guess we'd say, the top of their freedom of the press index for several years, along with other Scandinavian countries like Norway and Sweden, not surprisingly. And I took on a self-designed research project to go to a place where they were considered to have, good freedom of the press, and then what does that mean in terms of the quality of the journalism. So I chose Iceland. I was actually there in the wintertime in January and February of 2012. And in meeting with reporters there, what I learned was that they often, again, not surprisingly, look at the United States in terms of models for freedom of information and for journalism. They often cite Watergate, the Washington Post, the New York Times, and many of the journalists have in fact been educated in the United States, have gone to either Columbia University or other, well-known and prestigious journalism schools in the States. So they look to our laws and our freedom of the information. One thing that they were instituting in Iceland, I know you asked about France, but I'll shift it to another country just because that's an area that I've studied, is that they were introducing something called IMI, the Icelandic Modern Media Initiative, where they're trying to position Iceland as a place, as somewhat of a safe haven for journalists. And part of this came out of WikiLeaks also coming to the forefront of the news a few years ago. And again, with that, they were looking to rewrite Iceland's constitution, and with it, look at its freedom of information laws. And I remember one piece of it was that the default right now for freedom of information and access is that things are kept confidential until there is a request by journalists or the public. And they were looking to rewrite that so it was the exact opposite, that we have everything public unless it needs to be confidential and proprietary. And that was, I don't know if that's actually been instituted, but it would change sort of the atmosphere toward information to what should be public knowledge and public information. What should be the public's access to this? And again, I know that they were looking at laws around the world in other countries, U.S. being one of them. Of course, ours are based on, come from each state. They're not federal, but they were looking throughout the world to see what there were in terms of like templates and best practices.
And most of my experience has been with requesting public records on the local government level. And personally, I've always thought that the best way to acquire records is the easiest way. Sometimes you don't need to make formal records requests. Sometimes it's important to build relationships with people in city government, state government, or any type of government, and oftentimes you can acquire the records that you want without having to go through those formal channels, which always makes it easier. And I've I had lots of success with that. Oftentimes, if it's about a story that maybe a public official is interested in me reporting, but some of the stories, when they're less excited to see certain information out, it seems that some public officials can put up as many stone walls as they can to prevent the information from being accessible to the public. And yeah, for example, a good rule of thumb is to always request information in digital copies, in digital formats, if available. And I know it changes from state to state, but many states have public records laws that require public bodies to provide the records to the person asking for the information in the same format that they keep it in, so that if they keep the information in databases, and they're required to provide the information in electronic format. In Tupelo, Mississippi, where I covered government for quite a while, a department head there, he told me he could provide all of the information I wanted, but he gave me like 300 sheets of paper, which was kind of worthless when they were all, this was spreadsheet data, and so it took me it took some it took me going through the formal channels of filing the request, and I had to discuss things with the city attorney for a while. But fortunately, the city attorney there was very helpful, and he provided all of the information in the format that I requested, actually before the deadline. So it's really sometimes kind of hit and miss, depending on the relationships with the public officials and their attitude towards providing public records. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what their attitude is; they have to comply with the law.
And Robbie, I would say too, that's the downside. I understand the relationships part, but the downside of that is when access is based on relationships. And I've had students who've been in a room asking for records and being denied, and a reporter for the local newspaper would walk in and get it. And we had stories like that at the conference on Saturday. So, access should never depend upon a relationship. It's either a public record or it's not. And that attitude toward government transparency by your officials, it comes down to the kind of people we elect in local government and state government, and we need them to be able to push down through the bureaucrats an idea that this is government that belongs to the people, and more of an effort toward transparency on providing the information before it's requested, particularly at the state level, which can afford to do it much easier than small towns could, provide a lot of the data and reports and information. It's electronically created in the first place. It's not like computer memory is getting more expensive, it's getting less expensive, and provide that information, make it readily available in different kinds of databases. That's all about attitude.
Yeah, I'll add something in there if you don't mind. This is Jennifer. My experience with FOIA is mainly as an SPJ member. I'm on the FOIA committee and have been on the listserv in terms of supporting fellow reporters in the chapters when we write press releases in that end, versus being a reporter who's done, you know, thousands of FOIA requests. But one thing I would recommend to folks who are listening or watching the podcast as a way to get started is David Cuillier's book on FOIA requests, which I read cover to cover. A little plug there, but it's a great introduction into the way to approach the requests, our right to that information, and of course, oh, there we go, Joey's got it up on the screen. Do you mind putting it back up? I don't know if it got on the screen there. Yeah, The Art of Access, and it's actually David Cuillier and Charles Davis. We should give both people credit there. What I like most about the book is that it's easy to read, it's well laid out, but some things that stood out for me, I don't have my copy in front of me, was, yeah, the sort of intimidation that comes sometimes from government officials about, well, why do you want that information? And that is not relevant, why I want the information as a reporter or a member of the public. The fact that I have a request, in fact, he gives sort of template verbiage to use in emails and in your requests. And the truth is that we have the right. And I think as part of Sunshine Week, one of the best things we can do is to inform the public, not just fellow journalists, but inform the public that it is our right to this information, and intimidation shouldn't be part of the public information officer's role. Also, there's pushback, obviously, by governments. We're seeing, in fact, one of our fellow SPJ members is working on something in Massachusetts related to some legislation that, again, would limit the transparency. And what we're seeing is that sort of that idea about intimidation, but also, you know, what is it that you need the information for, when again it's our right to have that. So I think it's important that folks know that some of the tools that they can use to seek to continue to be persistent, and to use sort of persistent and consistent affirming language when trying to continue to request information that they want.
Yeah, and just real quick, I just want to point out to people who are watching online, you can ask us questions directly using Google+, or if you want to tweet using the hashtag SPJ Sunshine, we'll see your questions that way. One thing related to what you said, Jennifer, I very much agree that persistence is very important. I think that a lot of times public officials reluctant to provide public information, they often rely on people giving up, or kind of getting lost in the bureaucracy. And I think that it's important for us as journalists who look out on behalf of the public to make sure that we are persistent and make sure that we get the answers, because if the public officials are stonewalling and not providing the public records to us, I mean, just imagine all of the information that all of the rest of the public is just missing out on.
Yeah, I think to add to that, I think a great service that any small community or larger community newspaper or news organization can do is inform its readers or its listeners or viewers about the process of requesting public information. But then also communities and municipalities are doing trainings for their, government employees on how to respond to the requests. Because let's face it, ignorance isn't bliss, although some people might think it is, where, oh, I don't know how to fulfill this request, or they don't realize that there are laws that dictate how many days you must in how many days you must respond to a request. Even if you're unable to fulfill the request, there are laws that dictate that a request must at least be responded to, so that the requester knows that you're working on it. If anyone wants to chime in terms of their state or municipality on what those laws are, I don't know those throughout the country, but I believe that's true. If anyone wants to confirm that, Joey or Robbie.
Yeah, this is Joey. Yeah, actually, our state doesn't have a requirement that they respond at a certain amount of time, which, again, not just providing it, as you said, but at least acknowledging the request. And I just had some communications with someone yesterday who months and months has gone by waiting for a request, and they keep calling, and they can't even get a response from the government agency, the local agency. So actually, that might be a plus for our statute.
Yeah. And what state are you in again, Joey?
I'm in Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, yeah. I mean, I've read, I read stories, the Associated Press or the New York Times. I mean, large corporate-backed organizations in our country have been submitting requests for 2 years now. They're still waiting for a response or for the actual records. And again, either ignorance isn't bliss, or responses where we don't have the funds, or this is burdensome on our organization. Those shouldn't be rationales or fair arguments in the name of transparency.
Robbie,
Yeah.
This is Joey. That kind of brings up another issue too. Was it vexatious requesters, or people? I would call them gadflies. But as I point out, even gadflies are entitled under our state law to know and be fully informed about their government. But people who make lots of requests of government for information, and agencies turn around and say they're a burden because they're asking for information, they're entitled to it, and government could cut them off by simply providing all the information online in the first place, or making it easier access for everyone.
No, you're totally right, Joey. If you read the public records laws in every state, not a single state grants access to requesters who are polite and denies the request for the assholes. Because that's the way the laws work. Is it's for everyone. The only restriction that I'm aware of is that some states require the person making the records request to be a resident of that particular state, which I find kind of interesting. I know in Mississippi, you do not have to be a resident of the state to make the request. And I personally think the restriction of residency is just another way to restrict information from the public.
Is there an argument there for that, Robbie? This is Jennifer, and not one I'm defending, but is there an argument about the use of state or local or county funds? Similar to like using your local library, whether you're a guest or you're a resident of that library and being entitled to its information and resources. At some level, and again, I'm not defending it, but at some level, there is a cost, of course, to responding to the requests and the entire process of being transparent. So, let's talk about that as a reality, in terms of devil's advocate. What are either, the burdens to a community, and how should it and can it support that? Should requesters be required to pay even a small fee? or should it be free? You know, someone needs to pay for the process and to hire someone and to continue to fulfill requests.
Well, right, Joey, in Oklahoma, you do have to pay for the copies, and it's supposed to be the direct, reasonable cost. So it's should not be a money loser for making copies, but it shouldn't be a revenue producer either, which a lot of our local governments try to treat it as. And there are certain categories, particularly commercial requests, can be charged a search fee. But reporters and the general public who's trying to confirm that their government employees are acting competently and honestly cannot be charged a search fee. But back to the ideas, the government's already collecting the information. So if we're talking about simply the copies and you charge for it, it shouldn't be a money loser. It should be a break-even proposition. Now, I had a agency recently complain to me that so-and-so was making a lot of requests and then would drop the request right before it was turned over and change it slightly, and they were complaining, and I said, well, the solution already exists. Our state AG, and by the way, in our state, AG opinions are binding. You know, our state AG said you can't give copies away and that you can ask for payment up front. So if they ask for this requester to pay up front what the expected cost would be, then he would either have to, you know, he'd be ponying up the money anyway, or he would quit making requests that he had no intention of ever getting the information. So I think there are mechanisms already available or should be available in most states to provide for that.
And this is Robbie again. I just want to point out that you know, even though every state has a public records law, we all know that laws are all subject to interpretation. I mean, and I've found that, I know I've mentioned the role of relationships when you make the request, but certainly the information is entitled to everyone according to the law. You know, provided, let's say, they live in a state that would give that information to anyone regardless of where they live. But if you know, I've had situations when I've made a request and the fee was you know, upwards of, you know, $2,000 or $3,000 for emails I requested, and I thought that was pretty outrageous, and I made that clear, and I was prepared to adjust my request and make it narrower in scope to avoid many of the fees assessed for the request, and it ultimately, you know, the attorney that received my request, he sent me a kind of a nasty email, and then he just gave me all the emails for free. So I mean, a lot of it often just depends on if you make the request and if the cost seems onerous. If you talk to the person responsible for providing the records and explain to them that you're going to receive the information that you're entitled to receive according to the law, and they realize that you're serious about receiving the information, they'll work with you often, and if they don't, then that's why the law exists.
Mm-hmm.
This is Joey. Robbie, I'd point one other thing out, and what you're talking about, copies and stuff. Oklahoma's law, and every other state I've been in, entitles the public to inspect the records and make copies, and those are considered separate. So I know what we recommend now is that if it has to be a paper copy, that's all they have, particularly at smaller towns and counties, If they give you a paper record, you know, I think everybody's got now a camera built into their phone, or maybe now it's a phone built into their camera. But you know, you simply have a doc app to scan it in, or just take photos. And I know some local governments don't like that because they see it as losing a chance for revenue. But you have the right to inspect and make your own copies.
And following up on that, many public bodies make the distinction between charging for copies and providing electronic information. Every time I make a records request, I request electronic copies of the information I request, and I have not received copy costs for electronic records because there's no copying. This is just electronic information being transmitted from one source to another. And I found that as a way to avoid costs.
I agree with you. Unfortunately, this is Joey. Unfortunately, our state doesn't spell out how it has to be transmitted. If it's electronic, you're entitled to the electronic copy. So the question becomes, well, why can't they just email it to me as an attachment? And some agencies will do that, and some won't. And recently, we had a story in one of our smaller town papers this week where court clerks were in various counties. Some were charging to fax information. Now, obviously, their paper doesn't get used when they fax something, but they were charging $1 a page for the first page to send a fax. So, and why they were only using faxes and not emails, some of them have some very antiquated email systems. But no, I agree with you. Asking for it electronically is the best approach, but sometimes it doesn't work well in the heartland.
And this is just another reminder for people out there. Feel free to ask questions through Google Plus or to tweet using the hashtag SPJ Sunshine. I'm sorry. Was it Kathryn or Jennifer? Did I interrupt?
No, I put a tweet out there as well. It's hashtag SPJ Sunshine. Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, okay, that's good. Oh, I was going to add too, because I don't know how much time we've got on here, but I wanted to add, while we are focused on FOIA and all the freedom of information, I mean, to me, Sunshine Week is about freedom of the press, freedom of speech, transparency in government, in elections as well. And I think it's a great time, again, for us as journalists to just continue to educate the public in the role that we do as journalists is really on behalf of the public. It's not like journalists do this and the public's this. It's like we do this work to better our communities and our states and our counties. And oftentimes when we see something like Sunshine Week or FOIA, like this jargon and this terminology, it's like, that's journalist. That doesn't have anything to do with me if you're not a journalist. So I'm about really trying to help inform and educate the public from like a real world perspective of while you may not be a journalist, you should support a journalist because they're doing work on behalf of you and your right to see information that's going to help inform you, vote for the next election, or learn about what's going on in your community, whether it has to do with crime or the courts, the way that laws are being made or enforced. And in that way, again, Sunshine Week, I don't know if everybody knows that that's what it's about. And I mean, there's a million resources online. I think it's great. But to really encourage people, whether or not you're a journalist, if you're a student, even if you're not a journalism major, hey, this is important information, maybe in a poli-sci class or sociology class, and certainly internationally to find out what's going on in other countries in terms of freedom of information. We do have some rights and privileges that we enjoy in the United States, and certainly, but there are countries that don't have any freedom in terms of information. I was just talking to two folks who are from Mexico who live here in France, and they were informing me of a journalist who's been exposing corruption in the Mexican government, and she was subsequently fired from her position as a journalist, and she's quite prominent. And you know, that's luckily she's alive. There are regimes where it's very dangerous to speak out against governments. Mexico, Cuba, Syria, Iran, Russia, China, the list goes on. So while the United States may not necessarily be a violent place, you know, censorship happens in other ways.
Right.
I would just add there that SPJ last year led the effort to send a letter to President Obama about several things, but in particular about the rules that stop journalists from ever speaking to anyone in agencies or other offices without going through public information officers, and therefore being tracked and monitored, having no ability to have a conversation that is not tracked or monitored. I go back to the time that this didn't happen, and I think it makes all the difference in the world. I think we're losing much perspective, many stories because of it. It's another aspect of freedom of information, and I feel like it ties in so closely with the access to documents, because the two are completely related to each other. For one thing, you can have all the documents that an agency has, and there will still be someone in that agency who could blow your story out of the water if you could speak to them without the surveillance by the agency.
Yeah, and related to what you just said, Kathryn, I very much agree with you related to the point of having to work through public information officers for to acquire information. I've covered areas where public information officers, some were well-intentioned, some maybe were not as well-intentioned. Maybe their interest was providing as little information as possible. But then there are some public information officers, they see their role as a really helpful facilitator, which, you know, I really enjoy working with those people. But in government bodies that use their public information officer as another element to stonewall reporters, I think that's a scenario. Those are situations where we as journalists have to have discussions with whoever is in charge and explain to them that the public owns this information and it's ours, and we need to find the best means to acquire it so we can communicate it to others.
And this is Joey. By the way, that attitude has made it all the way down to small town Oklahoma, where the PIO for the entire city wants to control and tell reporters, you may not speak to anyone in City Hall without me being there and okaying the interview. So that's not just the federal government anymore, unfortunately.
Last year, SPJ sponsored a survey of journalists all across the United States, and it did document that this is spread like a virus all over the United States. It's I think it's spread through professional avenues. County and city governments tell each other how to do this, and public affairs officers, you know, have professional avenues to tell each other to do this. I think we in journalists have been very slow to push back, and the public is hurting because of it.
Yeah, and real quick, I see that we have a couple of questions from Twitter, and one in particular looks like it would be one you could um, you could help maybe provide an answer for, Joey. Um, Someone asked, are public university employees' emails and text messages public records?
If they deal with the transaction of public business, the expenditure of public funds, administering public property, we have an AG opinions that says yes, they are. And those that deal with particular students would not be, or the other exemptions that would apply. But yes, just like university faculty, the same would be true for university administrators, staff members, and bureaucrats.
And just following up on that, the answer, another answer to that question is certainly it depends on the state laws, the state retention schedules. But in Mississippi, public records are defined by their substance and not their medium. So it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if an elected official or if a department head writes something dealing with public business on a banana peel in crayon. I mean, that's a public record, and that's something that's subject to record retention schedules. And so if something is communicated dealing with public business in an email or a text message, the medium, whether it's an electronic message or a piece of paper or a banana peel, I mean, it's pretty insignificant. It's a public record.
Yeah, it's all about the content.
And so I know that we've been discussing freedom of information issues for probably upwards of 35, 40 minutes now, and I know, Joey, you have to run. Real quickly, we had another question, and maybe before we start to wrap up, we could respond to this. Someone asked, in our experiences, what government entities are best at making public records available, and in contrast, who are the worst offenders?
This is Joey. I'm not sure that. I mean, maybe libraries are pretty good at it. I don't think there's a one. I've got municipal treasurers and city clerks who are very good at it and who believe in it. And I've had police chief in this state, a couple of them actually, that I know who believe in open government. Unfortunately, sometimes it feels like they're outnumbered by those who don't understand the basic principles that the government belongs to the public. And I'd say the federal government, the higher you go in government, to state level and federal level, it gets worse.
Do you mind, Robbie? This is Jennifer. Do you mind repeating the question? The audio on my end had cut out for a moment.
Sure. Well, in your experience, what government entities have been best at providing public records, and also what have been some of the worst offenders in terms of not providing public records?
Oh, okay. I'm probably not the best equipped to answer that because I don't have a big history of submitting requests. But I will say that I was looking on Twitter and I see that there is a story on there by Pointer that says, "What's your weirdest FOIA experience?" And several people have weighed in talking about their weird experiences, but also best tips for actually getting information they're requesting. I noticed one person wrote in that they were Lisa Song from Inside Climate News. She's in Texas. She's in Austin. She says, I spent about 3 days in the reading room, and a paralegal sat next to me the entire time, often reading over my shoulder to make sure I didn't copy any of the records or take them out of the room, which would have required paying a $3,400 fee. So there's stories like that, if anyone wants to go to Twitter and see some of the things that people are also providing.
Yeah, and what about you, Kathryn? I know that you've covered the federal government for quite some time. Whether the federal government or other levels of government, who've been your easiest to provide access to information, and who've been some of the worst offenders for you?
Was that directed to me? I'm sorry.
Yes.
You know, that's a really hard question. You know, it's you just think I don't think I can talk that it's one agency versus another agency. It just seems to be random. I cover HHS a lot. Sometimes, on occasion, they're pretty good. Other times, you know, it is not happening. The previous story reminded me one time of going to DEA, and I just wanted to look through what was supposedly the public comments on a regulation, and I sat there for a day or whatever, and a employee sat there with me the whole time as I just went through the public comments and took notes. So, you know, it's amazing the lengths that they will go to control the situation.
And I know that we're starting to run out of time, but maybe just a reminder to people, if they have any other questions for us, maybe that we haven't covered, they're certainly welcome to contact us through Twitter or email, and our contact information is listed on the SPJ website related to this this Google Hangout. And so with this being so timely in the news, I don't think we could have this discussion without mentioning it.
Hillary Clinton?
Yeah. Jennifer and Kathryn, what thoughts do you have on Hillary's emails, and also just in general emails and text messages of public officials in general?
I'll make a quick comment and then sign off. I'm in a different time zone, so it's 8 p.m., 8:05 p.m. here in France. Not quite sure where to go with the Hillary Clinton emails, but what I would provide is that now that I work internationally as a journalist, I've lived in Iceland, and now I'm located in France, and I'm following European news more closely. I will say that I have a renewed appreciation for the First Amendment, the journalism that I grew up with and that I work under in the United States. But at the same time, I think it's a very precarious time, and that that appreciation, we really need to, as journalists, sort of either step up the pressure or the awareness and really inform the public of what we have in terms of our press as a profession, the rights that we are entitled to, but also the history also of our government and transparency or lack thereof, sort of dubious distinctions that the Obama administration takes on in terms of access to information. What Kathryn had mentioned a few minutes ago about SPJ putting pressure on mentioning that public information officer information needed to go through PIO officers all the time. So I have a renewed appreciation the fact that I've stepped outside of our borders, but I don't know if people always know that if we're sort of insulated and we get sort of complacent. So it's a really important time in terms of our profession, but also in terms of informing the public about our rights as the public and our ability to know and be informed about what our government is doing. Because the government works for us, you know. I'll leave it at that. I'm afraid I need to sign off, but this has been an excellent talk, and I hope we get to do it again soon.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot for participating, Jennifer. And Kathryn, I mean, what thoughts do you have on the Hillary Clinton email?
Well, you know, the thought that I have is just hearing it through the news is that it takes a lot of gall to do this kind of thing. You know, she said she made a mistake or whatever, but anyone who gets to that level of government should know that government correspondence is public correspondence, or it will be at some point. So, I mean, you don't use non-public avenues. That being said, the thought that also comes up is how this story has been so prominent in the news, and how we as journalists don't go talk so much about the restraints on the documents, and we don't talk about the other restraints, including the restraints by PAOs, which I believe are just as important.
Yeah, I think those are very good points, and hopefully something good could come out of this becoming a story. I mean, this is not an issue that's limited to Hillary Clinton. The National Archives that is responsible for archiving and maintaining the public records and correspondence of many federal officials. I think that it can be a tricky situation for them to try and enforce the law when you have someone that's I'm not sure how to characterize the situation with Hillary Clinton and her emails, but it seems really peculiar that that she would serve so long in such a high-ranking office without an official government email address, and whether or not it was legal for her to do it or not legal for her to do it. My top concern, I think my top concern is it the right thing to do, because we all know that there's a big difference between is something legal and is something ethically the right thing to do. And as journalists, and I know that we always want to push for as much information out there, particularly what's required by law. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this shapes up, and to see if perhaps this could result in additional policies, perhaps in additional laws that strengthen requirements of emails and text messages related to their archival and maintenance by the government.
I hope so. I hope something good comes out of it.
Well, Kathryn, I certainly thank you for joining us for this Google Hangout with SPJ for Sunshine Week. I mean, this is all of these topics are things that are important, not just one week through the year, but every day for journalists and people that really promote transparency in government.
Okay. Thank you for leading it.
Okay, well, thanks a lot. And again, if anyone has any other questions out there that we didn't get to, feel free to use the hashtag SPJ Sunshine, or you can send us messages on Twitter or emails. And this is Robbie Ward on behalf of SPJ's FOI Hangout for Sunshine Week. Thanks for tuning in.